The beginning of 1957, the Ampex Corporation delivered the world's very first 8-track tape recorder to guitarist Les Paul's home in Mahwah, New Jersey. Comedian W.C. Fields called it the Octopus because it made Les Paul sound like, well, 8 musicians. Les Paul himself could also be called the Octopus, not only for his work with the 8-track, but also he had his hands in countless projects and innovations, many of which changed the worlds of both music and of recording technology. First, and most obvious to anyone who knows about electric guitars, there's the fact that Les Paul gave his name to and helped the development of the iconic Gibson Les Paul guitar. This leads directly to Les Paul's second pioneering activity. In the 40s, he constructed one of the very first solid body guitars, nicknamed the Log, almost a decade before the Gibson Les Paul. Third, Les Paul was a successful recording artist who enjoyed a string of hit singles in the 40s and 50s, whether alone or with legends like Bing Crosby, the Andrews Sisters, and most of all with singer and guitarist Mary Ford. Fourth, in the 50s, Les Paul was a household name radio and television personality, for who many years created the popular Les Paul Show. Fifth, Les Paul was a virtuoso and pioneering electric guitar player, arguably the first shredder, who developed techniques that would influence many other guitarists. Sixth, Les Paul was an inventor who did not only contribute to the early development of the electric guitar, but also developed the first headless guitar and the first on-stage playback device called the pulverizer. This directly relates to Les Paul's seventh major activity, his innovations in recording and production. In the 40s, he was the first to build a home studio and pioneered new recording techniques like overdubbing and close miking and effects like delay, flanging and phasing. And eighth, Les Paul was the first to use the recording studio as an instrument, creating recordings that were clearly far more than just the registration of reality. In so doing, Les Paul gave birth to the concept of the artist as a record producer. As a result of his many groundbreaking activities, Les Paul has been called the quintessential American creative genius, the most important person in the American music industry, and the father of modern music. A detailed description of his many achievements could easily fit 8 videos. But in this one video, we'll try to give a comprehensive overview of his multifaceted life and the many ways in which he changed music and the recording studio forever. Les Paul was born Lester William Pulsfuss in Waukesha, Wisconsin on June the 9th, 1915. He started playing harmonica at the age of 8, inspired by DeFord Bailey, known at the time as the Harmonica Wizard. But when Lester's mother sent her son for piano lessons, he came back with a note from the teacher saying Lester would never learn music, and could the boy please not come back? In his early teens, Lester was given a Troubadour guitar from a Sears and Roebuck and Company mail order catalogue, and he quickly became good enough on it to perform in local bars and clubs, playing country music. He adopted the stage name Red Hot Red because of his red hair. In addition to his considerable musical talents, Les Paul's penchant for invention became apparent very early on. He punched new holes in his mother's piano rolls to create additional parts, in effect creating an early multi-track effect. He designed a harmonica holder using a coat hanger, which allowed him to play guitar and harmonica at the same time, and flip the harmonica also while playing. A harmonica holder based on his design is still manufactured today. Frustrated with the low volume of his guitar when performing at Beekman's Barbecue, he fitted a phonograph needle to his guitar and connected that to a radio speaker in an effort to amplify his guitar. Bothered by the resulting feedback, Lester realized that the problem was the resonance of the guitar's hollow body, so he filled one guitar with plaster of Paris. He also used the inbuilt microphone of a telephone to pick up the sound of a string that he strung across a piece of railroad track, which he then played back via his mother's radio. And in his father's garage, Lester built his own disc-cutting recording machine using a flywheel from a Cadillac, dental belts used by dentists to drive their equipment, and utensils lying around the house. Clearly, Lester Pulsfuss was already ahead of his time by his late teens, and working with inventions and concepts that would eventually change the world of music. When he was 17, he started playing with the Sonny Joe Wolverton radio band, and in 1934, when he was 19, he and Wolverton moved to Chicago, where they continued to perform country and hillbilly music. Lester had by now adopted the name Rhubarb Red. He recorded some tracks under the Rhubarb Red name in 1936, as well as 20 tracks with blues singer Georgia White. Around this time, he began participating in jam sessions with then well-known jazz artists, using the moniker Les Paul. He also started playing the electric guitar. Several jazz players had a considerable impact on him, including pianist Art Tatum and guitarist Django Reinhardt. And if you haven't already, please check out our Django Reinhardt video. In 1937, he formed the Les Paul Trio with Chet Atkins, half-brother Jim on guitar, and bassist percussionist Ernie Newton. The trio moved to New York in 1938 and cut 4 sides for Columbia a year later. By 1939, Les Paul's star had risen to the point that he was invited to join the well-known dance band Waring's Pennsylvanians, with whom he was the first electric guitarist to perform on a national radio show. Les Paul's profile was by now so high that he appeared in a Gibson catalogue showcasing the Super 400 jazz guitar. By the early 1940s, Paul was also recording with stars like Nat King Cole, Rudy Vallee, and Kate Smith. As ever, Les Paul's inventor side ran parallel with his musician side. Still bothered by the lack of volume of his guitar, he installed 2 pickups on his hollow body electric guitar, and at one point he converted a Bell & Howell movie speaker into a guitar amplifier. In fact, Les Paul's concerns had been bothering guitarists for a couple of decades. Popular music in the US in the 20s and 30s often featured instruments like drums and horns, and as audiences got bigger, the volume issue became more and more of an issue for guitarists eager to step outside their rhythm role. Several guitar companies and players began fitting piezo pickups to their acoustic instruments, and Gibson in 1936 brought the first mass-produced electroacoustic guitar on the market in the shape of the ES-150, which became known as the Charlie Christian guitar. However, cranking up the amp while playing these guitars resulted in feedback. Many players, including Les Paul, tried filling up the bodies of their acoustics with sand or other materials. It did not take long for people to realize there was an obvious solution, and 3 solid-body electric guitars were brought on the market in the 1930s. First of all, there was, in 1932, the Rickenbacker A22 Electro Hawaiian, also called the frying pan, because its aluminium body looked like, well, a frying pan. This was followed in 1933 by the Vivitone, in 1935 by the Rickenbacker Electro Spanish, which was made out of Bakelite, and in 1936 by the Slingerland Songster 401. In addition, various private inventors were designing and building solid-body electric guitars. One of them was the unknown Aubrey Wallace Appleton from Burlington, Iowa, who already in 1925 had attached the arm of an RCA radio phonograph to his acoustic guitar and amplified it with a radio. In 1941, Appleton designed the very first modern-looking electric guitar, using a solid piece of pine wood. Even the name he gave the guitar was way ahead of its time, as he called it the APP. Appleton presented his guitar to Gibson in 1943, but the company was not interested, saying that they could not imagine anyone wanting to play what essentially was a plank with strings. Les Paul's story, to some degree, parallels that of Appleton. He also eventually realized that the solution to the feedback problem lay in a solid body. and also in 1941 designed and built a solid body guitar. Inspired by his early experiments with the piece of railroad track, Les Paul found a 4x4 foot long piece of wood, bolted a guitar neck and a pickup on it, and nicknamed his prototype the Log.
So I took a 4x4, and when I got it together, strung it up, put a neck on it, and went into a little place in Sunnyside, New York. And I went into the club and I played it. And I remember the song was The Chic. And I played The Chic and nobody paid any attention to it. So I came home and my wife says, how'd they like your new guitar? I said, they didn't pay any attention to it. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put wings on it, so it looks like a guitar. So I put the 2 wings on this 4x4 and went back and played The Chic, and everybody applauded and everybody loved it. And I said, you know, I think I learned something here. The people hear with their eyes.
Like Appleton, Les Paul went over to Gibson to try and convince them to build a guitar based on his design. But also, in his case, Gibson refused. Apparently, Les Paul was for nearly 10 years laughed at and referred to at Gibson as the character with the broomstick with pickups on it. However, Les Paul was to have the last laugh, because in 1950, Gibson approached him about a new solid-body electric guitar that the company was designing, in response to the commercial success of Fender's Esquire and Broadcaster guitars, the forerunners of the now famous Telecaster. Gibson's new model was designed by factory manager John Hewis and company president Ted McCarthy. It seems likely that they were also influenced by 3 prototype guitars in the shape of Les Paul's The Log, the then solid-body guitar that Paul Bigsby made in 1948 for Merle Travis, and the APP by O.W. Appleton. The Gibson Les Paul certainly bears a remarkable resemblance to the APP. Les Paul was asked for input in the design of the new Gibson guitar, and for his endorsement, which Gibson hoped would boost sales. The idea was to create an expensive deluxe model, in line with Gibson's image. In the end, Les Paul's actual input in the development appears to have been fairly limited, though one of his suggestions, the gold top finish, to emphasize the superior quality of the instrument, became iconic. The Gibson Les Paul came on the market in 1952 and, as we know, changed the world of music forever.